I'm Elan Journo, Senior Fellow and VP of Content at the Ayn Rand Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight. This is the final event of OCON 2023. I know. But unlike past closing banquets, we've decided to invite a special guest tonight, and we're very pleased to host Yeonmi Park for a conversation. Yeonmi Park was born in North Korea, one of those brutal dictatorships on the planet. At age 13, she escaped with her family. She has traveled a long way to freedom, a distance measured not only in geography, but also in an intellectual awakening. Join me in welcoming Yeonmi Park to the stage.
Wow, thank you so much, everyone.
I'm delighted to have you here tonight with us. And I want to warn everyone in this room, you are in the company of one of the most dangerous women on the planet. And let me explain, for those who don't know, let me explain. The North Korean regime is aware of Yeonmi Park's activism. They're aware of her best-selling books, 2 best-selling books. One just came out a few months ago. Congratulations. They are aware that she speaks on the largest forums in the world, the largest stages. She reaches millions of people. And her viral videos have been watched hundreds of millions of times. The North Korean regime is afraid of you because you speak the truth. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for. Thank you. Thank you. I just graduated from Columbia University, so it's so surreal to be in a room where people care about truth. So thank you for caring about truth.
So I'd like to just start with where you are and how you got here. So I mentioned that you've written 2 books, and your breakthrough was a talk that you gave when you were, I think, 15, 16?
No, I was 21.
21,
yes.
I'm sorry. Tell us about how that came about. So this was at the One World Youth Forum?
Yeah, it was a conference in Dublin. It's called the One Young World, and they invite delegates from all around the world to attend. So they reached out to North Korean embassy in London. So can you send your delegation? And they said, oh, we can only send 3 because 3 have to spy on each other. If just 2 of us, we can collude and run. But if a third person, it's harder. So the North Korean regime said to the One Young World team, like, we can only send 3. And they said, okay, we can sponsor 2. Can you sponsor 1? And they said no. So they decided to bring a defector. That's how I joined the One Young World, because the regime was very dumb. Exactly. Karma, you know.
I would much rather hear from a defector from North Korea than someone who's being spied on. What was the message you wanted to share at that event with the world?
For me, what the main thing was, I escaped North Korea when I was 13 years old, and as soon as I got to China, was seeing my mother being raped, and then they sold me as a sex slave for just over $20. And a lot of people seem like knew about the slavery that happened hundreds of years ago, but nobody was talking about in the West the modern day slavery that was happening, especially under Chinese Communist Party. So my mission that day was really want to let the people know there are 300,000 North Korean girls in China right now their organs are harvested out of them. They get killed, they get raped till this point. And that was my main agenda, going there to letting the world know.
I want you to help us understand what life was like in North Korea. What led you to want to leave? And one of the things I've heard you say, and this is also something that comes out in your books, for those of us who have been born and raised in Western countries, countries with significant degrees of freedom, it's unfathomable what life is like in North Korea. Could you paint a picture for us what your daily life was like when you were, say, 12, before you escaped?
Yeah, so in a way, I always describe that my life in North Korea was, in a way, the different lifetime ago or different planet. I actually right now speak for living. That's what I do. And in North Korea, the very first thing my mother told me as a young girl was, don't even whisper, because the birds and mice could hear me. She said my tongue was the most dangerous thing that I had. If I said one wrong word, that was gonna kill up to 8 generations of my family. So people are not even free to think. You cannot even think. That's what life is like in North Korea.
I've heard that your life doesn't really belong to you in North Korea. So if you're an adult male, you get conscripted into the military. For how long?
So for men, it's on average a decade. And North Koreans are severely malnourished. You think I'm small, but I'm kind of one of the tallest North Koreans you're gonna ever see. Men who are 4'10" have to go to military for 10 years. For women, it's now 5 to 7 years. And it's a mandatory service. But then when you go to military, you're not just a military soldier, you're a construction worker. Because that's a free slavery for the regime. And that's how they use the people to build things for the regime and doesn't feed us.
You've called North Korea, I'm going to quote from your book, this is so eloquent, it is the Earth's longest running experiment in deliberately managed human misery. Some of the things that you describe in your book, I believe you, but it's hard to believe. So when you went through a period where you had no money or very little money, what did you live on? Did you have milk or eggs or bread?
Oh, well, I ate grasshoppers. I don't know what you guys are having tonight. I ate dragonflies. My friends were eating cockroaches. And this is, by the way, a nation founded upon an idea of equality of outcomes. Regime promised us a paradise. They said the government is gonna take care of us, our healthcare, education, free housing, everything was gonna be free if we surrender our freedom of speech, our freedom of movement, and our private property. Then regime was gonna give us a paradise. What the regime did was took everything from Northern people. They divided us into the most unequal society. North Koreans are homogeneous people. We became 51 different castes. So for instance, North Koreans are divided into big 3 categories, and I often use like fruits. Number 1 group is called tomatoes. You're red inside, you're red outside. Therefore, you're a communist. There's no doubt that you're a believer. Second is called wavering. You're apple. You're red outside and you're white inside. Therefore, your royalty is questionable. You need surveillance. Last is you are really screwed. It's something called a hostile. You're a grape. You're not red inside, you're not red outside. So government's gonna oppress you throughout the generation, and there's no ending in that oppression. And that's why North Koreans are starved and oppressed by design from the government. They choose not to feed us because that's how you can control people better that way.
You talk about how the system fell apart, the economic system controlled by the government, and the government just tolerated some amount of private economy and a sort of a black market. What happens to people who run afoul of that black market?
So I learned it later why the communist regimes do not like people when people trading. Because if people start trading, that's when you start thinking for yourself. It's a very dangerous act for the regime. So that's why they block the market and prioritization. And this is a perfect example where they say, socialism only works until you run out somebody else's money. North Korean regime never worked. They worked until the Soviet Union was supporting them. When the Soviet Union collapsed, and then the North Korean regime's economy also collapsed because they were subsidized by them. And in the 90s, people started finding ways to survive, and that was going to black market. And here I said black market sounds like you trade the drugs and weapons, right? It's literally selling dried fish, selling clothes. That's what's called the black market in North Korea. And through this black market, I actually got my first taste of freedom. My uncle had access to movie Titanic. Have you guys seen that movie? Yes, I fell in love with DiCaprio, but in the movie, as a younger watching Titanic, I was so confused because every movie in North Korea, every song, every book is about our royalty and how great the regime is. It's never about human stories. And so that market actually gave some freedom to North Korean people and let them see the outside world, like me watching Titanic.
So you mentioned that trading helped you see what it means to think for yourself. And what I've learned from your books and your speeches is that the North Korean regime is designed to prevent anyone from thinking for themselves. It's punished. And one of the things that really struck me is that you say, there are no words, and I'm reading from your book again, there are no words in North Korean for tyranny, trauma, depression, or love. Yeah. How is that possible? What is it that they want to prevent you from doing?
So, theoretically they say, how can you be depressed if you live in a socialist paradise? They ban the word famine. So when we're dying from a famine, we did not have a word to describe our misery. That's what true oppression looked like. Not the oppression that Americans currently talk about. When you're so oppressed, it's not about, being a vegan and having 10,000 different genders. But, but sorry. Thank you. In a true oppression, you don't even know that you're oppressed. That's the definition of oppression. That in North Korea, the regime don't give the word. And this is why I'm so alarmed right now in America, the control on the language. They say what we can say, what we cannot say. What word is offensive, what is not. Basically, humans, if you don't know the word, that means you don't know the concept. So if you don't know the concept of love, you're not gonna know what that is. And everything must be taught for human beings. So I'm a mother, my child is born. Do you think he knows what justice is? Do you think what he knows private property is? Somebody had to teach him. And that's how North Koreans do not know this basic concept, like human rights, that everybody understands here. They have no idea. They don't even know they are deprived of that.
So by taking away the words, they take away the ability to think about those issues. Yes. I want to explore that a bit more because that's very fascinating to me. A lot of people in this audience, I think, will resonate with them. One of the things you say is that there is no I in North Korea. There is only we. Tell us what is understood by love in North Korea? How are you supposed to orient your life towards? What are the things that are seen as values?
So I remember, I see that right now, even America, the beginning of this phase is happening. When we go to school, the school teachers tell us that, your father is not important to you. The most important person in your life is our dear leader. And if your father says something wrong, come talk to us at school. And now even in America, that parents are not safe like that to children. And just like that, they say your being your life purpose is being the revolutionary for the party and their leader. So it's not you to be an individual and have your own aspirations and have dreams. It's all about the serving this communist revolution the North Korean regime trying to achieve.
One thing I was stunned to read in your book is that every Saturday you are expected to gather in a group and denounce each other. And it's almost like a socialist confessional, but you're pointing at other people and pointing at... What is that? What do you take that to be? What was the experience like being in a circle where you're denouncing each other?
So I think you guys can understand this. It's like kind of an American version of sensitive training or diversity training on a steroid like 100 times on it. The unique thing about North Korea is that so every week, if we are children, once a week on Saturdays. For adult, almost once in 2 days. You gather together and you repent your sin because the regime became a religion for the people, right? They copied the Bible and became a religion. They tell Northern people that they have power to read people's thoughts. They have power to move the mountains. So people repent their sin, like compared to my dear leader's teaching, I was not a good revolutionary. And thank you, dear leader, for giving me grace and forgiving my sin. Next week, I will do better. But at the end of this self-criticism, the most important thing is that you gotta pick your classmate to criticize. And that's why in North Korea, there's no word of friends. We have comradeship. It's a very different definition. So entire week at school, at 8 years old, you're looking for your friends who's gonna do something wrong. That's how they plant the distrust between people. So people cannot trust each other to work together. Because now, people are enemy to each other. And that's how the dictators rule. Divide and rule, divide and control. So they divided North Korea in every individual, to children, to adults. Everybody have to force to criticize their classmates, their neighbors, otherwise they get punished. And that's how they continue to this day. And nobody they can never have a true friendship.
One thing I take away from that is that it's hard to imagine anyone in that society developing a sense of self-respect or self-worth or even self-esteem if one's constant focus is on how one's falling short of adoring the godlike figure of the leader. Do you think that and then the other thing I was going to ask you about is, I just want to clarify, so is it actually the belief that the leader, Kim, can move mountains, like he's got mystical powers? Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, for me, he was my God. I mean, I was even afraid to think that Kim Il-sung came from Christian family, and then he copied the Bible. So I loved you guys so much, so I'm now giving you my son Kim Jong-il. His body dies, but his spirit is with us all the time. So it was like Trinity, that circle. And so for me, for my parents, we all thought they were gods. So when I went to South Korea, when somebody told me that he was going to bathroom, he's not a god, he's fat dictator, I was really shocked.
So the victims of the North Korean regime are not allowed to develop personal values, personal relationships with friends. They're not allowed to think for themselves. Their whole orientation is towards a godlike figure. And as you've described, it sounds a lot like a religion. And you've described it as a kind of cult of the Kim dynasty. I think I watched a video of yours where you describe how people are forced into the streets to show mourning, to show like emotional commitment to the leader. And so if you don't show enough sadness at his passing, then there's something wrong with you. It's a public expression of fidelity. And that struck me as a deeply, deeply religious experience.
Yeah, it's in a way, it's worse than other religions. Like a lot of times a voluntary thing. In North Korea, there's a gun next to your head. Mm-hmm. If you don't show proper, worship. And adoration. So whenever the media, Western media, portraying North Koreans, right? Like when the Kim Il Sung dies and Kim Jong Il dies, people crying hysterically, and they say, "Why North Koreans are so weird?" They act like robots, and we literally have to clap to survive. Nobody knows. Like that's the thing in North Korea. Is the saddest part of till this day is that I could not even have a true conversation with my own father. I don't know what he thought about the regime or anything. Because in North Korea, it's like living you guys watch the movie Truman Show?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's faking it. And we don't know even ourselves how much we are faking it or not. Nobody can tell the truth. So I have no clue what my friends thought. Till this day, I don't know, and you cannot go to North Korea and do a public survey, right? How much do you believe in the regime? So till this day, it's gonna be a forever mystery. How much North Korean people gonna believe in this crap, literally, the ideology they are bringing to the people?
I want to turn to the story of your physical escape from North Korea, and I just wanted to tell everybody, you've given us a preview. There's some rough going ahead, just be warned about that. I found it difficult to read, and I'm sure it was much more difficult to experience. So you were in a city in the north of North Korea, near the Chinese border. You could smell the oily noodles being cooked across the river. That's how close you were to China. You could see the lights of China. Tell us what it was that led you or a family to make this fateful decision, which is risky because there are serious penalties for trying to escape North Korea. Tell us, what was the sequence of events that led you to make that decision, and what happened next?
So understanding North Korean refugees is a bit different because literally in North Korea, there is no internet. And they don't even have 24 hours electricity. I often tell my friends in New York, they're dreaming of, climate change. Like, we have Earth Day every day. There's no pollution whatsoever. It's every environmentalist dream is right there. But because of that lack of technology and access to the information, it's not like even Cubans or Iranians or Syrians, they know what's happening in the world and they want to go somewhere. It's when North Koreans try to escape, it's like I watched this documentary during the 9/11. There's a man, the building caught fire, and they jump out of the window because that is the only thing they have left to do to survive. And that's what North Korean women do in general. We don't know once we cross that frozen river to China what is awaiting for us. I've never even seen map of the world. I did not even know that I was Asian. The regime told me that I was Kim Il Sung race. North Korean calendar begins when Kim Il Sung was born. We have a different time zone. So I have no clue what was waiting for me, what even human trafficking is. We just jumped out of the window and that's what happened to us.
And I'm going to summarize a bit of what happened. So you were unaware of what would happen, and when you got to China, you were swept up into what is, I think, euphemistically called human trafficking. I think a better term for it is human slavery, modern-day slavery, sexual slavery. And there's a period of time when I think you went in search of your sister who you thought had left, and you and your mother were searching for her. There's a very difficult period of time when you're in China because you're in the shadows, right? China is not welcoming of defectors. What is it like to live in the shadows and be something that someone is buying and selling?
This is when people sometimes asking me, okay, do you like China better? Do you like North Korea better? Now, what a question. Do you like to be cut off or burned? Literally. But that's the thing. It's, living in China is during the time of Auschwitz. Those Jewish people were hiding. And at any moment, you can get caught and sent to concentration camp. And that kind of vulnerability that North Korean people are experiencing, because the Chinese authority are actively looking for North Korean defectors and then send them back to North Korea to get killed and tortured. So the best thing that could happen to us is that if we get caught, we would kill ourselves and not let the regime kill us, because that would be a lot more hard death. So that's how most of defectors live in China, and most of them do not make it to freedom. Actually, I asked people, do you know how many North Korean people to made it to America over the last 80 years? Just 209 of us. So most of them do not ever reach this point.
One of the things that impressed me during that difficult time when you were in China, before you made the escape through the desert, and we'll come to that in a minute, you were enslaved. And one of the things that I was impressed by was your determination not to be broken psychologically and physically. You were really incredibly brave and strong. I just wanted to acknowledge that, having read that in your book. And then I think what would be useful for people to understand is that you went from hell to just a little bit less of a hell in China. Tell us what led you to South Korea. Now, I don't know how many people know the geography that well. I'm not going to try to direct the geography, but the path to South Korea that you took is not a straight line. Why don't you describe how you ended up getting to South Korea and what that looked like?
So I was in China for 2 years as a slave, and then this man who bought me let me go. And then where do I go as an orphan defector? I was going to restaurants and begging them to give me a job to wash dishes. But the owner said, without the government ID, who calls something called like your government ID, we cannot even give you a job to washing dishes. And then the only place that we can go is a brothels. But there was another defector woman told us that it's something called the chat rooms, where they put you in a room, and then from a can, you show your body. But then, if we do that, these people are gonna feed us and give us bed to sleep at night. So, in a way, that was the only thing that I was not gonna be physically get raped. So I went to this chat room, and then my customers were actually South Koreans. And until that point, I thought South Koreans were colonized by American bastards. You know, they were suffering more than North Koreans were, because that's what the regime told us. And then from this chat room, I heard that South Korea actually was a better place. It was not a bad place like what the regime told me. And then this lady told me there are missionaries come from South Korea. They are rescuing North Korean defectors. So these missionaries came and then eventually told us that if we want to escape, we had to go walk across frozen Gobi Desert in minus 40 degrees by foot when I was 15 years old. And I asked this missionary, what do you mean that I'm gonna be free in South Korea? Because I did not know that word. And this person did a perfect job describing freedom to a 15 years old, like teenage girl. She said, sweetie, if you go to South Korea, you can wear jeans and you can watch K-dramas. And nobody gonna arrest you for that, because I was into K-pop at the time. And I thought, I couldn't believe there's a country where individuals can decide what they can wear, what they can watch. And that's how, for the second time, I risked my life to live life with freedom.
So that step took you into Mongolia, not South Korea, Mongolia. After a long period of time waiting to be processed, you were then allowed to go by plane to South Korea, where you were then accepted and you received help getting integrated in South Korean society. I want to talk a bit about your time in South Korea and then get into the time you're here in the US. What I was impressed by in that episode of your journey in South Korea is there's a lot of adjustment to life in a freer country. South Korea is just, it's a world away. But the thing that leapt out at me was the power of education in your path and the will that you put into recovering all the lost time you had because you didn't really have education in North Korea. When you got to South Korea, I think you were described by some of your friends as the learning machine. Tell us where you were when you arrived, just what grade were you relative to your age, and then what was it like and what sort of things did you learn at the time?
So when I got to South Korea, of course, I was adjusting to the new planet, learning what computer is, learning, seeing everything for the first time, coffee for the first time, looking at toilet. I did not never seen that kind of toilet. I thought I had to wash my hands in it, did not know I had to sit on it. Like literally everything was new. But the hardest adjustment was how do I trust again? Because when I got there, the South Korean officials were telling me, Americans are not bastards, they're good people, and everything that I believed in North Korea was lie, they said. And I was like, so if everything that I believed was a lie, how do I know what you're telling me is not a lie? And that's why I think I went to books. I wanted to know what happened to me. I wanted to know the words. So I got into books. I was reading to live, really. For my survival, reading was very essential. And that's how I reconciled what happened to my country and my people.
One of the things that changed the direction of your life, or at least brought you some visibility for the cause of individual rights, was you were asked to be part of a television show in South Korea. Tell us, what was the goal of this television show, and what was the understanding in South Korea of your experience?
So in South Korea, until that point, North Koreans were very dehumanized in public media, right? Mostly like North Koreans are scary, launching the missile, or soldiers are marching on a square, or the people are begging on the street. This something called entertainment show on Channel A, they wanted to humanize North Korean defectors. So they brought North Korean, so they had a show previous, something called a Chat with the Beautiful Ladies, and they came from like Ukraine, Russia, America, France, and then tried to talk to them, the South Korean celebrities. And that's what they recreated a program with North Korean women. And I was young, I was freshman in university, and they picked me. But I didn't want to do it initially, but then they said South Korean shows are so popular all around Asia, but also China. And they knew that I lost my sister, so she might be able to see it and find you. So that's how I got on that show.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring out in our conversation, which was really important in your development, is the idea of critical thinking, or the idea of thinking for oneself, which is one of the ways you put it. There's a story you tell, I think this is with the time you were in South Korea, and a teacher or someone is helping you acclimate to the culture asks you, Yeonmi, what is your favorite color? Yeah. And you have a very eloquent explanation of, you found that a stressful or anxiety-provoking question. Tell us why.
So when I got to South Korea, we have a lot of months of training, to become normal. Because in a way, North Koreans are coming from like Mars or even that. We don't know how to take the subway. We don't know anything. And they said, okay, before we start our orientation, maybe we all go around, introduce ourselves. In North Korea, there's no such a thing introducing yourself. Like even celebrities on the TV, they don't have names. The only thing matters is a dear leader. Nobody gets to have a name and be popular. There's no such a thing called a fan or celebrity. So I was like, I don't know what introducing means. Like, oh, it's easy. Say your name. Maybe you can say what's your favorite color. And I never knew because in North Korea, my teacher told me that my favorite color was red because that's a revolutionary color. And I never had to decide. I never had to think for myself. And in South Korea, suddenly, I had to think, I had to know what was my favorite color. So from there, I really learned that being free was not easy. At some point, I was literally, if the regime gives me enough frozen potatoes and doesn't kill me, I want to go back because it was exhausting. And it was also so scary. Depending on the decision that I make, I somehow have to be responsible for that. In North Korea, as much as you're enslaved, you don't have any responsibility. Because you didn't make that choice anyway. Nobody gonna come for you. But in South Korea, it was clear. If I made a decision, I have to be responsible for it. And that was very scary in the beginning to adjust to.
One way I think of your story is that it has two aspects, that you escaped physically from a country that is a prison, and then there was a further development of escaping intellectually and sort of developing your own mind. I wanted to turn, and before I get to, I have just a few more questions I want to ask you, but I want to take a sidetrack from your journey and ask you a bit about your reading. And when we were planning today's event, I asked you, this is an event for people who are interested in the ideas of Ayn Rand. The Ayn Rand Institute is the host of this event. And I asked you, Yeonmi, I saw a tweet of yours that mentions Atlas Shrugged. Tell me, how much have you read of Ayn Rand? So I would love to know. Tell us what you've read.
For the first time when I learned Ayn Rand and learned about objectivism, I was literally thinking, if this is what we're taught in school, we would not have this problem. We would not have North Korea. Thank you. And it's like, facts are facts. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. And that rationality, why is it so important, that reason is so important. Because in so many other parts of the world, dare to think is not possible. And that's how I got to reading all the books and essays, and I'm a huge fan. I'm sure you can teach me so much more about it after this. So I'm gonna join you guys in this journey to learn more.
I have to admit, I have way more questions than I have time, so I'm going to be very selective. I'm sorry. I want to ask you now to tell us a bit about your experience moving from South Korea to the United States. So this is the freest country, and this is where I've chosen to make my home. I'd love to hear a bit about what are some of the culture shock experiences you had? What are some of the things you loved about America when you got here? What was the experience for you?
Yeah, so this is like where, previous to your point, Americans were very aware about so there's two types of dictatorships. Nazi Germany understood this and North Korean regime mastered it. One is a physical dictatorship where they literally physically do not let you move, right? You can, like China too. There's a lot of physical dictatorship, but somehow Americans think this is the most important dictatorship there is. But actually the most important dictatorship is the dictatorship of the mind. They literally control what you think. And when I came to America, I literally thought this was the land of the free, home of the brave, where true safe space where I can think, I can free to talk and debate. And I made a very wrong choice. I decided to go to Columbia University in New York, and they redefine the word safe space. They say because this is a safe space, we do not allow discussions. We do not allow these ideas. You can ask these questions. And I think because my journey began with Colombia, it became a lot of alarming. But things that I love America is, we have 50 different states, and we have guns. I'm sorry, but I always say this. Literally, when the regime came and took my father like that from us, we would fall back. No country can ever be that enslaved when people have right to defend themselves. And North Koreans don't have any guns because they took everything out of us. So when I came to America, I fell in love with the Constitution. And those words came very differently to me because I saw actual tyranny. I knew what was possible.
one of the topics that you've been really active on these days is making Americans more sensitive to the fragility of American freedom. And one of the things I appreciated in your book, the more recent book, is you describe yourself as someone who's committed to an absolutist ideology of individual rights. Tell us what that means to you. Absolutist ideology of individual rights.
When I was younger, I was more nuanced on that. But I finally understood the virtue in being selfishness. You know, like when I was like reading the book Selfish Gene, and I was like very offended, you know. It's like, what a horrible person. And as I'm seeing the world more and more, actually there's nothing better you can do than helping yourself. That's, in a way, the greatest gift you can do for the humanity. It all begins with the self, your personal responsibility. And that's why I'm very much focusing on myself, my family, my son. Then if I'm all full, then that's how I can go and change things. So that view became very clear. When I was young, I didn't understand it. And as I'm getting older, I see that virtue, why Ayn Rand was talking about it so much in her books and in all her characters in the fiction books too.
The other thing I wanted to recognize as some common ground is that you are someone who champions some of the ideals of the Enlightenment, as we talked about already: reason, the individual, the value of the individual, the sacredness of the individual. I wanted to spend the last few minutes talking a bit about some of the things I took away, and then I have a surprise for you. One of the things I've been thinking about in preparing for this interview is the power of education, the power of books, how they've transformed your life, how they brought you to greater understanding. And that's a big part of what I and my colleagues do at the Institute. So I wanted to say thank you for the work that you've been doing and for being such a vocal proponent.
Thank you so much. We have more questions to
We're
go
not
for.
finished. We're not
Thank
finished.
you.
We have more time, please.
Thank you so much.
Please, I have only 3 more minutes. Don't take it away from me. So I wanted to leave you with one thought, and then I want to turn to a gift. The thought I had for you was that what I took away and I really appreciate is that you're someone who has done a lot to flee tyranny, which is a lot. And many people in the world have done that, and it's to their credit. You have also you've begun to deprogram yourself from all that brainwashing that the North Korean regime has done. But not only deprogram yourself, you have started to pursue new ideas and explore the world. And so what has impressed me is your courage in both risking your life, but also in taking the responsibility to develop your own ideas and your own independent judgment, and breaking the chain of what you call the tyranny, or the dictatorship of the mind. Yes. So thank you for doing that. Those are all the questions I have, yes. But I was asked to present you with something, so I need to explain what this is. So the founder of the Ayn Rand Institute, the co-founder of the Ayn Rand Institute, is Leonard Peikoff. Many of you know him. He was Ayn Rand's student for 30 years, and he is the foremost expert on objectivism. He read your book. And when we told him that you were going to be our special guest speaker at the closing reception, he was really excited. And then when we told him the event was in Miami, he was disappointed. I'm not going to be able to be here tonight. He wanted us to present you with something. And this is his first book. It is called The Ominous Parallels.
Wow.
This is the book that he worked on for many years with the supervision and editorial input of Ayn Rand. It was a significant development for him, and I think he's very proud of it. The book, I'm not going to read it to you guys, but there's a special message. No, not the book, the message. There's a special message in here from him, and it is autographed to you. So on his behalf, I'm proud to present to you this gift from Leonard Peikoff. Thank you. Let me say one last thing, and then I'll offer it back to you. Yeonmi is here, and she will be available to sign books if you have brought your copies. We'll do that when the music begins and the DJ starts.
Ooh,
If you
a party!
and there's a dance floor. If you don't have a book, or you would also like to get a selfie with Yeonmi Park, she's going to make herself available. All we ask is that you be respectful of her time. I'm not sure how much time she's going to have to do that, but I wanted you to be aware of that. And then thank you, finally, for being here and sharing your story with us. It is truly inspiring.
Thank you for having me, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.